Hi everyone, it's Shannon here. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we are making the sentiment the focal point of our card. We're actually going to create a offset rainbow backdrop for our gorgeous die-cut sparkly sentiment. For today's card, I will only be using the Oversized Smile combo from Waffle Flower Crafts. It comes with this great stamp set. I will be using the large smile, some of the sub-sentiments, and even the stars included in that stamp set. And then I will even use the smile word die that's included in the combo. I'm going to start by positioning here on my MISTI the large oversized smile stamp. I'm going to stamp it onto an A2 panel of light pink cardstock, and I'm inking it up in Picked Raspberry Distress ink. Now, because I'm using distressed ink, it's going to require me to stamp this multiple times to get a nice, bold, crisp impression. I think I stamped it 4 times in total. Here's my last time, and you can notice I did stamp my smile kind of in the upper portion of my card front because I want to save some room to stamp it multiple times. So I've now cleaned my stamp, dried it, and now I'm going to position it slightly offset from where I stamped it in Picked Raspberry. I'm kind of going to the left and below that first smile. And then I'll pick it up with my MISTI and I'll ink it up with my next color. I'm using Mermaid Lagoon here, and I also stamped this about 4 times to get it nice and bold and crisp. And I'll basically repeat that for every one of my colors. So again, I cleaned my stamp, positioned it to the left and below. You can just eyeball it here. I'm not worried about it being absolutely perfect. And I'm moving on to my next color. This is Pine Needles. I'm kind of going in reverse rainbow here, starting with basically my cools except for that Picked Raspberry, and then working my way down to my my red, or my warm color. So now I'm on to my yellow. This is Mustard Seed. Mustard Seed is a really kind of a lighter color than all the ones I'm using, so it only took like a couple stamps to get that color down nice and crisp. And then I'll move on to Wild Honey. This is kind of serving as my orange. I wanted to pick really bold colors for today's card, and I really like this combo. And now I'm positioning it here for my last stamping, and this is going to be my red, which is Barn Door. So I'm just going to ink this up again and stamp it, and that creates this beautiful, very kind of graphic and modern kind of background for the rest of our card. I just love how these distress ink colors layer on top of each other and make new colors. I just think that's so cool. So now I'm going to move on to our dimensional sentiment. I used the smile word die to die cut black cardstock. I made 3 smiles. Now the die set comes with a shadow layer and the more linear layer. I use that more linear layer to make these smiles, and now I'm just going to adhere them one on top of the other. I'm going to use liquid glue to do this. This makes it a lot easier, especially if you have like a fine nozzle like my glue bottle does. And then I will add my last smile right on top. Now I also have to do the little tittle for the eye, so I've saved all 3 little dots, and I'm going to again just use liquid glue and stack them one on top of the other. Definitely going to use my tweezers for this because that makes it a lot easier. So now that I have my stacked sentiment all ready to go, it's time to add the sparkle. Now I'm using embossing powder to do this, so I'm applying some Versamark ink on top of my smile. I did it all the way up to the S, so I kept the S open so I could hold it. Poured over this gorgeous multicolored sparkly embossing powder, and then heat set, of course, with my heat tool. You definitely could avoid this totally if you used glittery cardstock. I didn't have any black glittery cardstock, so that's why I'm using my embossing powder instead. So I'm now doing that S, so I already applied the Versamark, dipped it in the embossing powder, and of course heat set with my heat tool. Now the last thing I have to emboss is that little tittle, so I'm going to grab it here again, apply some Versamark ink to it as carefully or as best I can. Then I'm going to place it on a little scrap of micro pour tape, dip it into the embossing powder. A little bit of that embossing powder sticks to the tape, which is fine, and then I'll heat set with my heat tool. Now the tape did kind of burn a little bit here, so probably the tape wasn't the best thing to do, but it did at least hold that tittle in place while I was heat embossing it, so I think it worked okay. So now I'm basically going to kind of finish this card up. I do have the stars and the sub-sentiments still to stamp. I positioned the stars here around my sentiment, kind of placed the sub-sentiments there down just for a second so I could kind of figure out where I wanted my stars to go, pick them up with my MISTI, applied some anti-static powder because I'm also going to emboss these, inked these up with VersaFine ink. I did stamp them a couple of times just to make them nice and bold and crisp, and now I'm going to pour on that same embossing powder. And it's really cool, the embossing powder will stick right to the the VersaFine ink, even though it's not an embossing ink, and that's just because it's a pigment ink, so it stays wetter or tackier a little bit longer, and it can grab onto that embossing powder. So I'm heat setting that, and now I'm ready to move on to my sub-sentiments. I repositioned them, picked them up with my MISTI, and now I'm going to stamp those in VersaFine as well. Not going to emboss these just because I think that will make it a little difficult to read. Sometimes that glitter kind of obstructs, especially those fine kind of sentiments like our sub-sentiments here. So now I'm going to move on to adhering my panel onto my card front. I've grabbed a tape roller and just kind of added some tape to the front of an A2 top folding white card base, stuck my panel down, and basically all I have left to do here is adhere my stacked sentiments. So I added some liquid glue to the backside of my smile, just kind of positioned it in the middle of my kind of rainbow offset background, and then finished here by adhering that little tittle right above the eye, and that will actually complete my card. I'll now hold my card up to the camera so we can get a good look at the background and that sparkly sentiment. Love these bold colors for that rainbow offset sentiment, and if you look closely you can kind of see how the colors layer. I just think that's so pretty, and I think that sparkly smile really does complement the kind of bold colors that are again in that background. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.